Wang, she is definitely a pioneer when it comes to Wall Street. She graduated from the Columbia Business School back in '83, the executive program, but she's been doing financial money management since about 1972, so she's seen a lot of up and down cycles.
And so we're kicking off this big day, as you said, Vani, here at Columbia with Lulu. We want to start by talking with you about coming to Columbia in 1983. Columbia was different. New York City was different. What drew you here?
I came to Columbia because I had already been working in Wall Street for a number of years. I had developed a good practice, but I knew that in the future was a firm of my own, and I really wanted to have the best credentials. I had gone to Wellesley College undergraduate, strong credential, but I thought I needed to have the credentials of a great university like Columbia. So I came really for that reason, but found that it was far more than that.
Well, talk about that specifically, because you were working and doing the executive program, right, which was like Fridays for a long time. Tell us about what you got from being here.
I found by coming to Columbia that everything I've been doing and observing as an investor on Wall Street, it all began to come together in the context of theory and practice. And I believe that when you take practice from experience and then putting it into some sort of a structure and theory, it really works then. It all makes sense.
And one of the things that you quickly identified was the ability, both as an investor and a leader, a business leader, to make stronger connections between the U.S. and China. That clearly has been a big part of what you've been doing. That has never been more relevant than it is today. Tell us what you see right now, especially headlines every day about Hong Kong. Maybe we start there. What do you make of that situation?
I think it's a very fraught situation, and I hear from friends and colleagues on both sides, and they're both equally grieved. And I think the way it works out is that I don't think Beijing realized it was going to go this far. I think they certainly do not want to have a Tiananmen Square. It's a very different world we live in, social media. They cannot have that. So they have to find some face-saving way to begin to calm the crowds. I think, fortunately, the beef that the demonstrators have is really more with the Hong Kong government than with Beijing. So I think if we can work through Carrie Lam, she has already withdrawn the extradition bill, and if she can begin to negotiate on the three other conditions that the protesters have set up, there is a potential to work through some understanding.
Lulu, is there a role for folks outside of Hong Kong and outside of China? Because there's certainly been some push among the protesters to involve the United States. What's your role on that, or view on that?
I do think there is a role. In my not day job, I'm also on the board of Asia Society, which is really the foremost nonpartisan group trying to bridge U.S. and Asia. And we had been very busy talking to both sides about the issues. I think if we can find ways, the Chinese are very big on faith. They cannot be humiliated. And if there's a way in which they can continue to stay with the one country, two systems, begin to exert some control over Hong Kong, but not with the heavy-handedness we've seen, I think there will be a solution.
Business leaders and certainly investors are talking increasingly of a decoupling between the United States and China. Given you've spent decades coupling the U.S. and China in many ways, how much do you worry that may become a reality?
I think there are many people who are concerned that this is going to be one win, one lose. I still am a believer that it can be a win-win situation. I think right now we have two leaders who are both under short-term pressure to try to resolve some of the problems before their economies crumble. I think the advantage that Xi has is that he also is playing the long game. And I think he believes that the long-term future of China is very conditioned on China retaining economic, political, not necessarily military, but geopolitical power. The question is, does the economy crumble before he can achieve this? But he has many levers that are not present in America.
Which he's been pulling, especially this week we've seen.
He has been pulling levers. He's moving more liquidity into the system. He's getting some of his companies, both multinational and Chinese, to begin to try to do more investing in the economy. He's trying to bring more capitals investment back into China.
Lulu, I'm curious though, what you are hearing is that are the expectations from U.S. folks that you're talking to, folks in China, that there will be some kind of trade deal that's done? Or is the fear that I think we keep hearing is that we're going to see China kind of go off with their plans and have its allies, and the U.S. will go off on its plans, and when it comes to trade and developing technology, what do you expect?
I think it'd be very difficult for there to be two fortresses. The world is too connected. The supply chain, the markets, we are interdependent. So I don't think we can truly exist separately. I do think that some of the reforms that the U.S. is pressuring China to make are not actually bad for China. Some of the progressives in China have been militating for them all along, but they had been sort of outnumbered by the hawks. But I think with this current situation where she's under pressure internally for having managed it in an indelicate way, it's going to provide some opportunity for the progressives to say, look, it makes sense that we open our markets. It makes sense that we liberalize. And so let's do some of this. We will make it appear that it is our own initiation. We're not being bullied into it. That's very important. The West has to not play the bully hand. I think that will be very difficult for Xi to overcome. But if there can be sensitive diplomatic accommodations on both sides, I think it could come out better for both countries.
One of the biggest concerns for investors, sort of broadening to the entire world, Lulu, is this notion of negative yields, a world where pensions and other huge institutional investors are just not making the money they need. Do you see a short-term change in that? You're so involved in so many of these big institutions as customers and as an advisor.
Right. Well, I think there's a lot of liquidity around. There is money to be invested. And in a way, that's why many bears on the U.S. market are puzzled and frustrated that they've been short and the market continues to just want to work its way up. So that money wants to find a place. And in this very troubled world, the U.S. and the U.S. dollar seems to be a relative safe haven. So I think if we can find some stabilization of the economic situation, that money can go back to work. The U.S. certainly needs to have a capital cycle. We have not been investing in our capital and equipment. So I think if we can just get some predictability, stability, I think both China and the U.S. and other countries can put money to work for the economies.
Just have about 30 seconds left here. We'd be remiss not to ask you just generally, too, a little bit about your market outlook. People are talking a lot about recession. They want lower rates. In just about 30 seconds, how do you see the economic outlook and the market outlook?
I don't think we're headed into a deep recession. I think we are clearly in a slowdown. And when that happens, you get a lot of panic. And certainly the geopolitical situation is very troublesome. But I think the incredible volatility gives investors great opportunities. When I see a down 800-point day, I am just licking my chops. I'm looking at my list of stocks
so
I
you're
enjoy.
buying.
Oh, into the corrections.
Yeah.
And then you get another 800-point swing the next day. If I have some stocks I'm not so comfortable with, it's a good chance to clean house.